When you compose a photo in the camera app using the portrait mode, the dual cameras in the ISP sense the scene. They create a depth map, they separate the subject from the background, and then using machine learning, it creates facial landmarks and actually changes the lighting of the contours over your face. You just swipe to pick a different effect.
Promise me no promises.
What is the deal, beautiful people? It's your boy Ramon, Lifestyles Defined. Let's talk more computational photography and the iPhone X. This is becoming a pain in my ass, this conversation, and it really stemmed from a long time. It was actually an AMA video. The video's live on the channel, where one of the homies asked about computational photography and is it the future of photography? And I would argue, yes, it is the future of photography. And there's a lot about computational photography that we as photographers need to respect. I don't want to get knee deep back in that conversation, but I'm quite reminded of this after Apple's showing with the iPhone X. So I got into a conversation on Facebook with one of Jerry's people. The gentleman's name was Jamie. A quite enjoyable conversation at that. It's hard to have enjoyable conversations where people sort of disagree, but you respect each other, and then the conversation keeps rolling, and you find things that you do agree on, and you continue to respect each other like decent human beings. Like, that almost doesn't happen anymore. But whatever. We started talking about the differences in the offerings on the phone and in the many camera systems. I'm sorry, what we could find. We're not talking about comparing iPhone versus Canon, iPhone versus Sony, iPhone photography versus real DSLR. That's not what we're talking about. I think the conversation here is computational photography, and is it a real thing? Is it a big deal? And I think it is. I think a lot of people conveniently exclude computational photography when it's convenient for them. So things like HDR would be considered computational photography, and I get it. Way back in the day, HDR is just a technique, and you would do bracketing and you would blend it, and there's your HDR image. In today's world, most cameras that you pick up, there's a HDR mode. Some of them even have it. If you're shooting auto and it detects architecture, it kicks into HDR mode, right? And this is something we've seen on the iPhone. This is something we've seen on Android phones. And I think it's something that we need to respect. That is useful. And talking to a lot of photographers, photographers, as far as I can tell, a lot of them are because they know what they do. They do it in and out, day in and out, same thing. And they don't like change. I get why this conversation sort of ruffles feathers, but as a photographer, we need to continue to learn new tools, especially if it makes your job easier. So some guys would look at something like the new studio lighting that Apple's throwing out there, where you take the portrait mode, and already here's a trigger word, the portrait mode in the iPhone. We know that it's just a computational thing to simulate the depth of field and the bokeh that you get on a DSLR with a large aperture. Fine. So what Apple has done was they took that even further. They added different options in there called lighting options, or studio lighting, I think it is. And this thing is amazing. So what it is the camera, as you're looking at someone, right? The camera, which I shouldn't even say just the camera, because there's a processor behind it that's also doing the same thing aside from the sensor, is doing a real-time analysis on this person's face. So when you go through the different modes, it's reevaluating the light, and then it's applying this look. One of the looks that were here really triggered me because they called it studio. Really what it was a low-key look. And I was just taken aback by how easy it was. And this thing is in beta. For them to hold up an iPhone and get a low-key image of a person in broad daylight. I can't, like, that really took me back. Because I've been working on low-key portraits for the last, year. I've been doing a lot of them, and I've really been dialing in the technique, my specific look. If you look at these images right now that are on screen, I'm quite proud of these images. This series of images represent a year of hard work, a year of tweaking, a year of trying to research about a portrait and accentuating a man's jawline when you're taking a picture versus a woman, and where do I want the light to fall off? Where should the light fall off? How close should the flash be? How much room should there be between my subject and the back? Like, hardcore research and trial and error I've been putting into this, and to see Apple just do it with a button, it was just, you just had to applaud. You just had to applaud. And I'm not the biggest fan of Apple. Some of you guys, if you subscribe to our technology channel, links in the description below, you know I'm not a big fan of Apple, but you have to give credit where credit is due. Where this led me, now I'm looking at all my cameras with a side eye. This $1,000 phone is doing what my $3,000 camera can't. Why? Why? And it annoys me. What annoys me even more is when you look at the circumstances, right? Apple, first of all, they're not a photography company with a legacy of photography. I'm looking at Canon and Nikon, right? They're neither of those. They're barely even Sony, right? And that bothers me. Secondly, the Apple is pulling this off on a form factor that's 2 millimeters thin, packed to the gills with all types of other crazy shit. If Apple can find a way to cram the goods needed for this type of computational stuff in a phone, paper thin, why can't Canon and Nikon and Sony and Olympus and Panasonic and Fuji get it in the regular goddamn cameras? Why not? How? I just don't understand it. And Jamie, the gentleman who we were talking on Facebook, he had a point. He said he's been waiting for years to get the laser focus, the laser focusing system that we see in some of the smartphones, particularly the LGs. That laser focus stuff is super fast, laser fast. See what I did just there? And you just have to wonder, why aren't these camera manufacturers doing it? Now, Jamie had the stance where I don't need all of that. Some of it's gimmicks, but even if it's not a gimmick, I don't need it, and I understand that. But to me, what makes a Ferrari is all the bells and whistles, and if you so see fit, if you are then a professional, you can turn it all off. But at the very least, it all has to be there. It has to look beautiful. It has to sound beautiful. It has to have a crap ton of horsepower. It has to be able to stick to the road. Like, I don't want to buy a Ferrari to look next to me and see a guy who has a better driving experience than me. At the end of the day, the goal is to have a good driving experience. At the end of the day, the goal is to have a great low-key portrait. I don't want to be confused. I don't want to be in a situation where, shit, what do I take out, my phone or my camera? I want to take out my camera. We're quickly approaching a world where that's not quite the answer anymore. I'm in broad daylight. My camera isn't going to get me this low-key portrait. But this phone will? What? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just ranting. You guys hit the comment section below. And if you're curious about the iPhone 10, if you haven't quite heard the madness, if you're under a rock somewhere, check out the link in the description. I'm going to link directly to my conversation on that and what all Apple had to offer on the tech channel. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more coming. My name is Ramon, and I'm out of here. Peace. Well, I guess. And the reason we started Lifestyles Defined is because if we weren't on camera arguing about these things, the technologies, the phones, the iPhones, the Androids, the cameras, the games, we'd be on the phone arguing about it. We'd be in each other's houses arguing about it. So why not just put it in front of a camera for everyone to enjoy it the way we do? That's what Lifestyles Defined is all about. We just